With nearly every success, there is a line of failures and setbacks, sometimes a very long line. Many of those stories get condensed into pithy journeys that minimize the struggle. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about triumph and disaster that Mark's guests faced and how they overcame the adversity to shine. Now, here's your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and we have a special guest for you. Now, you may not be listening to this because I haven't mentioned it at all, but this is actually the season finale of From the Ashes. We're at the finale of season 1, and because of listeners like you, we've been renewed for a whole year. It's going to be broken down into 4 seasons. And every finale, we're going to have a special guest. We might have a panel. We might have a call. We might have a Q&A. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Send us an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. But today, we have Sura Hertzberg, the most anticipated From the Ashes guest ever. Now, you may have, if you've been listening for a while, you may have heard her on one of our past podcasts with Jordan Bellman on the imposter syndrome. She came in, she called, she trolled us all. Now she gets her own hour. Sura, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. What an introduction.
Yeah, well, I first met you, similar with Jordan, in Israel. Mm-hmm. And I think I knew it clicked when everyone was hungover, everyone was sleeping, and you're just like dancing and twerking and screaming on the bus and just like bringing in the noise. And, for me being sober, I was like, this is someone that's got it. This is someone that is an unstoppable machine.
Mark, I think that was you twerking, actually.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you were teaching me a couple pointers.
Yeah. It's easy to mix it up, I know. Yeah.
So you've had a hell of a life, and I feel like I'm just starting to get to know it. We've been friends for a few years now, and every time a story comes up, I'm always like, damn.
You're like, really?
Right. Really? Like, you did that too?
Yeah.
And, here on this podcast, right, we talk about the From the Ashes stories, this idea of when you had a failure, you got kicked in the teeth, and you came back stronger. So what's one of those stories you'd like to share with the audience here?
Well, the story that first got brought up for me when I was thinking about coming on this podcast was, and you like to make fun of me about this, but I did I worked as a performance artist for a long time, and near the end of my career, I lived in New York and I lived in Berlin, and I was traveling around and performing, sort of everywhere. Back alleys, as you've said. Kat's Deli had this pop-up shop in New York. I performed at Kat's Deli, this crazy piece where someone was getting fed like a bunch of corned beef and pickles. And yeah, it was. Can
I sign up for that?
Incredible. I mean, you missed it by
guy?
like 6 years. Yeah, right.
My dream.
I know, but you would never want to eat corned beef hash again. Let me tell you that much. But so I was like, doing this work, and I've kind of reached a feeling of wanting to move on, wanting to move forward, a kind of like feeling of this community being really small, and insular and incestuous, and sort of everyone was kind of just stroking each other's egos and paying each other to go to their performances so that they'd go to their performances the next week. And, I also am like not great at being part of like, I'm like always 1 foot in and 1 foot out to like every community that I belong to. And so I was just like ready to be 1 foot into a different community. So anyways, I was making a piece called Naked Serenade. And that's the part that you like to make fun of me about.
It's a good title. It's so
Serenation. Good. It was so good. Titles are definitely one of my strong suits. Let me just tell you that much. But Naked Serenade was a daily like video project where I filmed myself naked singing a song, like a song that gave me comfort. And, the sort of tagline from me was like, nudity is this place of extreme vulnerability for most people. For me, less so. And for me, singing is when I feel the most vulnerable. I have now processed through so much of this like trauma around that and thinking about that as like, my field in psychology and working through this sort of stuff in therapy. But at that time I was like, this is this really vulnerable place and I'm going to like, share this thing with the world. So I did a daily video that I posted to YouTube every day of the month of January 2017, I think. And, gained a following, quite a following, and crazy comments, like really, really dumb ones, like, this girl need put clothes on, like stuff like spelled terribly wrong, and other stuff that was really inspirational, like, like, has changed my life, and like, wow, like, you're so brave and whatever, like, I feel so inspired to blah, blah, whatever. Yeah, so just was like picking up followers and growing, these comments and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the month, I changed the handle. Like, you have to have a YouTube channel for 30 days in order to change it from like a bunch of weird letters and numbers into, whatever, youtube.com/your thing. So I changed it and I was so excited, youtube.com/naked serenade. And immediately it got taken down, and it was flagged, not just flagged, but it was like, this is gone. Like, just fuck you.
Deleted. Just like banhammer from the sky. Yeah. Right.
And you like go to the page and it's like, this like has been taken down by like extreme violations of, sexual content. And it was like, I mean, I was careful. Like there's not even a nipple. There's a nipple or two, but like, it's like, it was pretty tame.
Pretty good.
Like,
yeah,
it was pretty good. And I mean, at that time, especially, like, you could flag something as explicit, and the rules then were, like, if it's artistic and not graphic sexually, and it's for an artistic purpose, you can show nudity. And so anyway, so I, fought them as much as I possibly could and tried as hard as I could, but YouTube was like, basically, you're done, fuck you. And so, to not despair, I immediately put everything on Vimeo. I made a whole Vimeo platform for it, Naked Serenade, vimeo.com/Naked Serenade. And Vimeo has always been a lot more elegant for that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I just threw everything on Vimeo and was like, this is fine. I'll just do this. And the difference and the reason that I had it on YouTube in the first place was because of the traffic. At least at that time, YouTube was a really big platform, and it had a lot of traffic in a way that Vimeo doesn't. Vimeo doesn't really promote in the same way. Vimeo doesn't, I guess they do like suggested next video, but it's just not the same kind of a network. And also it's like, so, and the whole point for me of moving from this insular performance art scene in Berlin, and New York and Europe, and was to share something a little avant-garde, a little performance arty, a little different with an audience, and especially with a YouTube audience that was looking for porn, like that was looking for naked women, and they found some chick singing a song really sweetly and vulnerably in the nude, and they were like, what the fuck is this, And so that was like, the whole purpose was to put it out to a bigger audience. And so having to rein it in into a Vimeo audience already was also like, okay, well, this is, this is my arts crowd again, maybe a little broader, but still, here it is. So I threw it up on Vimeo, whatever. It was fine. I was happy. It got a little following there again. And it was nice to just like have it. And I kind of moved on, did a lot of other stuff. And then last year, Vimeo changed their TOS, and I had some videos behind the private thing that were like on Patreon and blah, blah, blah. But essentially, because I was like linking to this Vimeo account, even though they were private from a pay site, they had changed their TOS so that essentially you can't, terms of service, in case anybody doesn't know what that means, so that you couldn't link from a pay site to Vimeo, blah, blah, whatever. And they took it down again. They took it down for the first time. And it was like, after having been up there for 3 years, right in the middle of the pandemic too, it was like, you're done, like canceled, like, whoa. And it was funny because I hadn't really like, felt, so, and I've had Instagram accounts deleted, and I've had, other stuff taken down. The art that I make is definitely edgy. It's definitely, working in a field with nudity and around a relationship with sexuality and a relationship with the body that is scary and uncomfortable for this puritanical world that we live in, mainstream.
Yeah, can you tell us more about that? Like, what, in your opinion, makes it so scary and uncomfortable? Like, why is it just struck down with lightning? What's the threat there?
Yeah. I mean, I want to like give the most basic answer, which is like the female body and like female sexuality is like terrifying in this land and culture. But I think it's more than that. And I think that's sort of a simplified explanation. I think what they would say is that like the platform is that like, we want this to be family friendly and like they don't want to deal with lawsuits. They don't want to deal with anything that might look like pornography. I know like Tumblr took down all of their stuff because of child trafficking. So it's like there is this real dark world that exists, and the art that I make is edgy and is asking questions about that and looking at, some sort of relationship with this darkness, but in an incredibly, I think, positive and also very like open way, where it's like, what is all this fear and what are you so afraid of? And I mean, every great artist has been censored because they're asking questions that people don't want to have to ask, and pulling back the wool of these inconsistencies in society that people don't want to look at. And it is what pushes things forward. But it's not fucking easy.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I like about the art. I mean, the small amount of the art that I've seen is that it does seem to question, society. And I think there's also this like that you've talked about, there's this personal piece that you have, right? Where all your art pieces are also your own emotional processing, right? Done on the stage, right? Done through movement, done through performance. I think it's really admirable to, make that process so public. Yeah. And like you said, hopefully, I mean, you can let me know, but I'd imagine the intention is that somebody watches that and is like, oh my God, like that's how I feel. Or, oh my God, like I know someone who's been there, or I really get that. And here is this woman who is, putting it into a digestible format, in a format that is evoking an emotion in me and helping me move through, my own unique version of this challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like all of that, I think that's one aspect of it that really entices me. But also, the guy that gets on and misspells, get that girl a shirt, like that also entices me too, and inspires me to keep going. And yeah, I think so, like moving into the work that I'm doing now, and now I'm in grad school to do what you do, to be a psychotherapist. It's like, all of the work that I was doing, all of my artistic practice, all of my, 20s were spent like in service to trying to translate and deepen my knowledge of myself, of my body, of my history, of my, present moment, but also my future and my past. And within that to deepen and understand like humanity and other people and connect. And so, yeah, I mean, I see like this work that I'm, doing now, or sort of this field that I'm moving into, as like such a like outcry from that, or such a like next step, in the process. And I think that this idea, or sort of like what you're getting at to me, is this kind of like way of connecting and sort of helping or working with people, that psychotherapy is more like fine-tuned to do. And the work that I was doing was like very much like me going through my own processing, and it was like me on a stage bleeding my heart out, night after night, and telling people like, wow, blah, 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 whatever, like really going into that place myself. And it was exhausting, and it was, painful and hard and really important, really beautiful. But also, but finding the nugget and the kernel in that of what I really want to be doing, or whatever. What I feel like I was doing was translating what I saw in the world into a different medium, which was, through my emotions, through my living my life, into art, right, onto the stage. And now this sort of deeper piece, or this potential to connect, one-on-one, or I'd like to do group workshops or work with couples, but is just even deeper and even deeper and even deeper. And yeah, I had a meditation teacher once who was like, I met them like 10 years ago, and, I was a fresh little 20-year-old, and I was like, in Hawaii, and I was like, when I had one more year of college, and I was like, when I graduate, I'm going to go, travel the world. Like, this is what I want to do. And he was like, I had that idea too when I was that age. And he was like, what I realized was that instead of going and traveling the world and going like this deep, just a little bit deep, I could sit right here and meditate and go like, whoa, this deep, really, really deep.
You would say that.
Yeah. Right. And he's not wrong. And I did travel the world, but yeah. Yeah. And they're still my teachers now, which is great. I love them.
I think that's something that we should talk about in the next segment, because, in our industry that you're coming into too, right? The word deep gets thrown out a lot, right? And connection gets thrown out a lot. But I'd be so curious to talk and see, like, what do we actually mean by that? Because I think it can be a blanket statement, but what does it mean to actually know somebody deeply, or actually have like a deep emotional experience, or to actually truly be intimate with another? It sounds like that's something that you've explored, again, through your art, and looking to explore through, this practice of psychotherapy. So if you're listening, stay tuned for the commercial break. If you're enjoying what you're listening to, be sure to send us an email, like us, share us on social media, do all the stuff. Thanks to the support out there. We are renewed for a whole year. So From the Ashes is not going anywhere. We're going to have a lot more fun guests and a couple repeats too. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the other side.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are the experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azalea.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azalea, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
Our thoughts and feelings not only affect our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. Find new meanings of love, authentic expressions, and better connections with the people in your life. Tune in to Love Light with Dr. Jean Marie Farish. This program will feature guests and discuss ideas that will bring a better life to you. When you find this perspective on love, it will change everything. Listen live every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, sitting across from Sura Hertzberg, talking about...
Metaphorically.
Yeah, I mean, like in the digital realm. Wouldn't be a podcast if you're just not like nagging me immediately. Thank you. It really feels like home. Anyway, we were going to talk about deep connection. We're talking about sex and sexuality. We're talking about, the idea of decoupling nudity from sexuality and what that means. And also you getting banned by the man.
Yeah.
So we covered a lot of things.
The man.
Fuck the man, fuck the feds. Don't tread on me, am I right? But what I want to say is, Sura,
Yes.
as a deep individual, what would you say depth means to you? Either with yourself or with another?
Well, I told you I was going to try and make a sex joke out of this, but I think just saying that is enough. I mean, I kind of want to hand it over to you. Mark, as a deep individual,
Yes.
what does knowing yourself mean to you?
To me, and I think this is a big part of my recovery journey, it means just being present, right? So in recovery, you have this idea of like a higher power, whatever, right? My higher power the God thing never worked for me, but what did work for me was Buddhism and being present for whatever happens, right? Whether it be good or bad, painful, confusing, joyous, just trying to consistently root myself in the present moment and to take in life. Yeah. And that's true for me. I mean, it's aspirational. I mean, I don't do it all the time, but for the most part, aspirationally, both externally and internally. And I think it means something I try to bring to my clients is this idea of having the courage to look at yourself in the mirror and accept what you see. And that's so hard. Yeah. That's so hard.
Yeah.
And the hard part for me has been accepting where I have a fear of something, or when I feel like I don't know what I'm doing, or when I have a disturbing thought. Maybe I feel like jealous or like sadistic, like I want to hurt somebody, right? Or I feel insecure, or I feel weak, or I feel like petty. Like all those things that I think, I always like to trash the therapy industry, but I think that therapists in general, we like to think we're better than everybody. I really trying to hold that. And I'm like, hey, I'm just more aware of how flawed I actually am.
Right.
And try to talk about that openly and be like, no, this is what I'm at. Like, I'm not trying to be like a perfect paragon. I'm never going to get it all right. Like there are some things that I'm not able to do. And these are hard for me. I mean, you and I have talked about using, grandiosity as a defense. Right. Which I think, I can fall into. I don't think I'm disclosing too much to say that you can fall into that.
Right.
So part of my, depth practice or my spiritual practice is just like, it's fun to joke around and I like joking around it with you. But then like coming back and being like, no, this actually, I'm like really afraid right now. Yeah. Right. Or like, I'm not taking the higher road right now. Like this is where I'm at. And having compassion for that and having understanding for that. And most importantly, not lying to myself about that, because it's so easy to lie to ourselves about who we are and who we think we are and who we think other people are and who we think the world is, et cetera, et cetera. Buddhism would call that delusion. And I love that word because it is like, it's a strong word, but I think it's true. It's like living in delusion, like living in a fake world that if the delusion gets too strong, it bites you in the ass. right? Like at some point you're interacting with a world that isn't real.
Right.
And you get punished for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like, so I told you earlier that I had like this massive night of dreaming last night. And it was just like, I would wake up and flip over and just like go back into it. And it was like all over the map, like really like a lot going on there, including being on this podcast, which I already did last night. So I don't have to actually be here right now. So.
Already nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Already did it. Yeah. So but what I was thinking about, I don't know if this was in the dream that I was thinking this, or this was in for real life that I was thinking this, but we have these emotional states that are like really easy for us to go into and to name. I think all of us, you know, some of us are more aware of our emotions and some of us are less, but if you're even somewhat aware of your emotions, you can kind of name a few, and you can probably, you go consistently into a few. And I was thinking, like, you know, the ones that I find really easy for me are anger, right? For other people, it would be like sadness, you know, like a depressive state. For me, like anxiety, or like sort of this just like tension, a feeling of like stress about the future. But I was also reflecting, I was like, another state that I go into incredibly easily and well and can notice is joy and pleasure. And that's something that I have sought, you know, obsessively and addictively, but also in this present open state, like it's something that I also really readily accept and flow through and within and into. And to me, so, you know, going back to that question of depth, it's like part of recognizing, part of going deep and understanding yourself is like being aware of what emotions are coming up and flowing through you, not being attached to any of them and not really chasing any of them. And I think accepting and allowing yourself to go into states that are not so comfortable and familiar is part of this process and practice. And, you know, I remember you just said this the other day. You were like, my brain will do anything while I'm meditating, anything, crazy things to get me out of that state, you know, to get me to try and whatever, not be present. This speaker in my class the other day was talking about a study, which I looked up, that essentially was saying, you know, a huge swath of the participants would rather give themselves an electric shock for 10 seconds than sit alone quietly in a room for 10 minutes. And I was like, everyone in the class was like, wow, oh, wow, that's so crazy. And I was like, yeah, I get that. I was like, right? Yeah. I was like, okay, but is the electric shock cool? You know, like, is it tight? And like, and, you know, as addicts, like, that is something that absolutely you can understand. It's like, I don't want to feel this, but I definitely don't want to feel that, you know, and I know the consequences of this, and they suck, and they're, you know, repeatable, and I can feel this way, and I can see this pattern, but I really don't want to feel, you know, this way. So I'm going to take this choice instead and, you know, hope for a different outcome, or just be like, you know, this is a place that I understand. And what you're talking about, I think, is stepping off of that escalator, you know, and you can't just stand still in the escalator because it's still going forwards. It's like the race thing, but you have to actively like walk back against the escalator. You know, you have to actively like walk up those stairs to get away from it and to really go into that deep place. And at the same time, it is about sitting there. And it is about quieting, and it is about being still. And so it's like the action and the forcing and the pushing also is counterintuitive and counterindicated.
I think it's a really, we talked before about your art asking uncomfortable questions. I think meditation asks a really uncomfortable question, right? Which is like, who are you with no frame of reference? Yeah. Like with no reference points, with no markers. And I know, you know, you and I have talked about this, that this is something that you're leaning into, is this idea of like, who are you without other people to ping off of? Right? Who are you without like media to occupy your brain? Right? Who are you without like this sense of identity of like having a hobby or whatever.
Right.
And the answer, right, is like nothing, right? The answer isn't like, oh, here's like my list of who I am, even though I have that because I'm highly neurotic. But it's like, you know, the answer is like you dissolve, or at least I can say I dissolve without that, because it is very scary, I think, for the human to be alone. And we want to cling on to a sense of identity, and the mind will spit out like, hey, remember this memory?
Right.
Hey, here's something you want to think about. Oh, hey, you want to like go back and like have a fake conversation with this invisible person? Like
right.
anything to like avoid that kind of dissolution process, which happens. And if you take that to the next step of like, oh, that's like the base state, like the base state is emptiness and openness. That's a lot of uncomfortable questions of like, who are we, right? Like, do we have anything? And I think it's a very scary place to be, to have that real lack of ego.
But it's interesting because, like, at the same time, I think people like chase that dissociation or this, you know, disillusionment of the self, or this kind of like ego death in some ways. But, you know, there's the dark side of it, or the, you know, kind of like left-hand path of it or whatever, where it's like that I think people, without the meditation, without the sort of sitting still, like people are constantly chasing that space and that state. I like love and hate that like ketamine became this huge thing in like the mid-aughts, you know, in the London club scene. And I'm just thinking about like, if I did ketamine when I was like 14 years old and was just like fucking dissociating like left and right and like the underground clubs in London, like, whoa, what kind of culture and society? I mean, I was doing my own, you know, ruckus drugs and stuff, but it was like MDMA, and it was connectative, and it was deepening the pleasure, and, you know, rolling around and making out with people. But fucking like getting tripped out on ket, like, is so interesting. And it is a dissociative, like it is that space, right? So, and again, that's like the dark side, that's the left-hand path. And what you're talking about, the meditation and it's like, it's so hard, you know, it's like so difficult to just sit there and do nothing. And yet, and the spaces that you enter, of course, are very different. But yeah, I think like in the psychedelic world, I think with the structural support, like of a psychotherapist or of, you know, a ritual and a path, or like an intention or whatever. I mean, a lot of things that you can reach certain spaces of higher consciousness in a lot easier of a way for a Western person.
Yes. I mean, I think, look, I mean, we've talked about this off the air. I'll talk about on the air. I have an extensive history with psychedelics. I haven't done them in a very long time as part of my recovery process. I don't think I would be where I was today without that flash, without knowing that there's something different. Right. But for me, and I'd be curious what it's like for you, but for me, it was totally like, it's a different space for sure. And for me, the intention was different. For me, the intention to go to egolessness or to go to dissociation was aggression. It was like, I don't want to be sober, or like, I want to go after something, right? It was either like destruction or possession, right? Whereas through meditation or just living a sober life or just whatever, you know, having deep conversations with somebody, doesn't have to be all meditation, right? You can get present through like literally anything, like exercise. It's an unfolding and releasing process. Like it's very relaxation based. It's very like unfolding versus like a grasping or a crushing. And this is what it was like for me. You know, I would take acid to get some insight, which is, you know, has an intention, or I would take acid to just like hard reset my brain, you know, or I would dissociate in order to not feel or not be present to what was actually happening, just to kind of like hard shift myself into a different way of being. And I think as a side effect, I got some good messages from that, but at least the way that I was using it. And I never did a ritual. I never did like a shaman. I never did anything that was like held at all. Right. It was just like stuff I bought and used in my basement. Right. But yeah, to me, it is different. Like, because in the sober experience or in the flow experience, maybe it's a better word for it. I don't think, you know, it's like, it's actually full. It's like bountiful. Like there's actually so much going on if you pay attention to it. And if you are able to be present, you can lose yourself in the moment. And that's such a beautiful thing. It's such like a beautiful moment of merger.
Yeah. Yeah. For me and my perspective, like, I don't think that they're dissonant from one another. Like, I don't think that they can't go hand in hand. And I understand where you're coming from. Like, your life was in peril and you were, living something that like wasn't fulfilling you, and it wasn't something that you could do anymore. And I get that. And I think that like there are other folks who can incorporate in these practices together. I think having a mindfulness practice, I think meditation specifically, or, Buddhist meditation might not work for everybody, whatever that means for them. But having some sort of a mindful practice, like being able to look at something in your space when you're feeling stressed out and be like, wow, this is beautiful. Or just taking a deep breath, or recognizing, again, naming your emotional experience and understanding your present moment and your response to it, is so key. And at the same time, I think you can use substances of all kinds, or, sex and sexuality. This is another thing that I'm incredibly interested in, is you can use something to run away, or you can use something the sex or drugs or whatever to connect and to deepen, or food, or conversation even. You can relationships, whatever it is, you can find ways to fucking exercise. I mean, that's what you mentioned earlier. And people absolutely dissociate through jogging. People are, heavily addicted to the endorphins that they feel. And all that is to say, again, there's these ways of utilizing what's around us to deepen our connection. There's that word again, depth and connection. And, there's ways to use substances and what's around us to dissociate and disconnect. And I think we're taught that one is good and one is bad. But what you're presenting, I think, is the sort of paradox of change thing, where it's the more that you are trying to change your scenario and change your brain and change the way that you feel and think about things, the more impossible it is to do that. And the fact is, whatever space you're in, if you can have metacognition about it, if you can think about how and why you're doing the things that you're doing, that's already doing it.
Yeah, I think that's the key part, right? Just what you're saying of using it to tap more into your experience rather than to hard shift it and move away. The part that I would add is that for those of you that want a mindfulness practice or want to practice, try sobriety or whatever, it's also really freaking boring. There's this idea of getting in touch with the mundane and being okay with not an ecstatic experience or not a peak experience. That I think, going full pleasure or full hedonism misses that point, right? Because most of life is pretty just rote, right? I mean, it's beautiful in its own way, but it's not blasting your neurons with ecstasy. So we'll keep talking about this. We'll keep threading on this in our next commercial break. If you like what you're hearing, shoot us an email at podcast@mark-azulay.com. I'd love to hear any feedback. If you want to have Sarah back on the show, let us know. Anything you send over to that, I'll send directly to her if you have any questions or want to get in touch with her. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the other end of the break.
We're making it easier to listen to the Voice America Talk Radio Network live wherever you go on iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android. Download it from the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are the experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azalea.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azalea, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
For teens, by teens, and about teens. Tune into the uncensored and unedited discussions with young adults on Express Yourself. Every Sunday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. Smart, tenacious teen hosts and reporters from around the country speak up and speak out. Express Yourself. Visit the website for the show to find out more at expressyourselfteenradio.com. And check out the show on the Voice America Empowerment Channel every Sunday. Are you ready to move to your next level? Listen for Empowering Women, Transforming Lives with host Rebecca Hall-Greider. Each show will focus on a central topic with discussion, guests, and your questions being featured. Our show is perfect for women who feel a call in their heart to step out in a bigger, more powerful way in their life and just need some encouragement, inspiration, and practical steps to support them on their journey. Empowering Women, Transforming Lives can be heard live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with a replay of the show Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Get the news on our shows and other happenings by following us on Twitter. Find us at Voice America TRN or twitter.com/Voice America TRN.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azalea. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azalea.com. Now back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azalea. We were talking about psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. We're talking about human sexuality and talking about, deepening into the moment and learning more about what it's like to be human, right? To be on this world. I was associating, Sura, last time we hung out, last weekend when I was in San Francisco, I shared a story about MDMA use, and I think that might be helpful for the listeners to hear. This idea of, you might have been too far gone by that point, but
whatever,
man. No, so what I talked about with you is that I was very shy and shut down for most of my childhood, for almost all of my childhood. Couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't look people in the eye, couldn't buy something from a store, always felt really overweight, felt ugly. I felt like, the word I use in therapy was mutant. I felt inhuman. I felt wretched, all the time, right? To the point of just living in shame and didn't want anyone to see me, wore large shirts to the beach, right? Didn't want to be in public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, overcoming that, what actually helped that was MDMA, was taking that, going to shows and dancing. And I told you about someone like the Pittsburgh rave scene where people would wear masks, people would wear large kind of baggy clothes. It was a mix between raver and hip hop scene. And there was this idea where you could just dance anonymously. And most people, I'm sure, were on something. I mean, I certainly was. But this idea of allowing myself to feel something in private and start to move and start to actually feel my body and feel proud of it, or feel grounded in it, or feel rooted in it, actually literally feeling my legs and arms, which I think I had dissociated from my entire life.
Totally.
I growing up, I played a lot of video games, read a lot of books. I was always in my head. Like the body was always just like an impediment, right? To do what I wanted to do, which was being, a brainy boy. But I think, based on, my childhood trauma, and I think I needed MDMA. I don't think I could have done it another way. Like I needed that to break through, because it does create this feeling of connection and, more importantly, feeling of safety.
Yeah.
That allowed me to do some of that deeper exploration.
Yeah.
And when I got sober, I didn't want to give that up, right? I didn't want to give up being able to dance. I didn't want to give up feeling confident in my body. I didn't want to give up feeling grounded in the world. And there was a whiplash effect, but I think I'm good now. I'm really good at talking to random people, but
and dancing.
Why
not to dance?
Yeah, but all I'm saying is I think that there is a place for these kind of breakthrough experiences. Because it can present like a different world, right? It can be like, whoa, like this thing that I thought was like just me is actually not true.
Yeah.
Like stuff that I took for granted can actually be completely shattered. And that was a very powerful moment for me.
Well, I mean, you were talking in the last, before the break about taking psychedelics you were like, I didn't have an intention, or, my intention was to like totally reset my brain consciousness, or to like workshop something, and process through something, or see it from a different angle. And to me, like, wow, what an incredibly like potent substance to like be able to assist you in that way and help you move through something or readdress something. I know, like, I really had the idea of like officially doing this podcast that I'm going to do when I was on acid, of just like, there is this incredible connective experience that like, I want to share and be a part of. And like, it's okay to put yourself out there, and it's okay to, move your body and dance and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that like, as an experience or as a tool, for example, I think that there's a great deal of potential. And that's what they're doing. I mean, in, this incredibly like Western and scientific, way, like MAPS, for example, and other organizations are doing clinical trials with MDMA and ketamine, and, looking at PTSD and, suicidality and depression. And yeah, there is like so much there. There is so much potential, and I don't think that it has to be one or the other. And I think for you, like, what I understand about your addiction, and like my, relationship with addiction is somewhat different, but you were in this space that like, also, I hope this isn't calling out anything, but you were in the space where it was life and death, and you had to make a choice.
Oh,
that was
absolutely,
like,
totally.
Right. And it wasn't the MDMA. I mean, I know that like that was your last.
No, there was other things involved.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I think about sometimes you telling me the story of your last experience on MDMA, and you were like, I just decided it was going to be the last one, and and it sucked. Like, it was shitty, and like, this thing didn't come through, and blah blah blah, whatever. But like, yeah, like, I think that for some people, you must throw out the baby with the bathwater, and you can't have the good of both. You can't live this life without that. But for other people, you can actually consciously utilize substances. And I think that the consciously part of it is incredibly important. And that doesn't necessarily, like, I know this is like going away from kind of my whole industry in certain ways, but I don't think that necessarily means like with a therapist at a center, like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who like don't have access to that, or there have been shamans, for example, like serving medicine forever and ever. And it doesn't have to look like one thing or another. And I do honestly think, like, taking acid in a conscious way, like in the woods or with, your lover or whatever, and having like an erotic experience that's like out of this world, that's really, vital and life-changing, or whatever it is powerful and important. And that's actually something I'm going to do a workshop with this Berlin-based sex positive website on creating like a ritual space to do like erotic work in a psychedelic space. And that's something I'm really interested in. And it's like combining together a lot of different forces and energies, and a lot of potential for a lot of things, good and bad, or it's very qualify-y, but
well, let me ask you that. What do you hope that people would take from an experience like that?
Like what you're talking about, dancing, and you were wearing this mask. I remember that it was like faceless, basically. It just had eye holes. And this experience of being embodied, of connecting with another person, connecting with yourself, shifting your mindset, but also like really being completely fully in your present moment and somatic experience in a way, for an extended period of time, is deepening and connectative and incredibly powerful. And I think that, you can go into a place within yourself, within the world, within the greater sort of spiritual context, and interpersonally with your partner.
Yeah, it's wild. And this is a whole other podcast, but where my mind goes, it's always wild to me how countercultural being present is, especially being in the body is. How it seems to be truly threatening. And I guess for the people listening at home, one thing from my experience that I wish I had heard before starting things like this is, at least for me, when I started getting present, whether through, psychedelics, or through sexuality, or through exercise, or through embodied meditation, or walking, or yoga, what I first encountered was a lot of pain, actually, a lot of stiffness, a lot of trauma, a lot of like sadness, a lot of emotion. So I just wanted, before we wrap up, just to say that if you are interested in going down this path, don't judge yourself if what you hit first is the darkness. I found that needs to be kind of cleared out, processed through, dance through, whatever it is, until you can get to, I think some of that like ecstatic love and joy that is there, right? It definitely is there.
Yeah.
So, Sura, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you'll be on a future episode. Can you let people know where they might find you?
Yes. I have a website, surahertzberg.com. Mark, you helped me design it. SuraHertzberg.com. And there you'll find links to a lot of my performance work, to my modeling work, and to my podcast, which is coming soon. And you can get in touch with me in that way.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you again for the support that let us get renewed for a whole year. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the socials. Really does help to continue to build the audience. If you got something out of this, if you could just share it with one or two people that you think would really benefit from it, that would do so much for this little show as we're kind of, getting our wings and starting to fly. So thanks for joining us on From the Ashes, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay for From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. We'll have another edition of the program then. Meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. Until next time.